Welcome, everyone. Today we're continuing the Associa Gulf Coast educational series where the goal here is to ensure that you, the community manager or the board member, are given more information rather than less so that you can make better decisions. Today our featured guest is Fred Lauro from Sherwin Williams. Sherwin Williams is one of the Associa national vendor partners. We've done an awful lot of work with Sherwin Williams, and we speak extremely highly of Sherwin Williams, and certainly with Fred. He's done an awful good job with our clients, both current and future. And the idea is real simple. We're going to bring Fred in here in a moment, but we're talking about paint and paint projects. So Fred, welcome to the show. If I could you kind of just tell everybody a little bit, not only about yourself, but a little bit about Sherwin Williams?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate you having me. My name's Fred Lauro. I've been with Sherwin Williams for 5 years. Been in the industry since '99. My focus has always been condos. I've never veered off of condos. So throughout the years, I got to see how projects start, how they work, how everything just rolls through, and I've seen some stuff. So Sherwin Williams, we're a national company. We've been around over 150 years. We really started working with condos, I would say, in the last 8 years. They were really targeting more new construction, but as they start rolling into the condos and helping managers and board members, it's really turned into a big part of what we do now. We have specialty tools online, and there's a lot of things to help managers and board members get through a paint project.
Excellent. And you bring up the obvious point here. We're talking about paint projects today, and paint projects in and of themselves can be massive undertakings. Some could be a couple $1,000s and upwards of millions of dollars, depending on the size of the building, the location of the building, and all that. But paint projects in and of themselves can be a daunting task. And I like to believe that our managers, although extremely intelligent and very professional, we're not paint experts. And quite frankly, that's where you come in, where you can make the manager's life easier in this example. And the first piece I want to talk about, Fred, is about the time, the length of time that paint projects take. But I'm not talking about the application of the paint on the building. I'm talking about how long, in your opinion, how much time should a board consider when they're starting to think about a paint project to the time the paint is actually put on the building? How much time really do you think is appropriate for a nice, positive project?
So let's start from day one, where first you pick your manufacturer who you want to use. You call that manufacturer. Say it's Sherwin Williams. I get a call from a manager or a board member. Hey, we're looking to paint. We want to get this thing started. Typically from that day, you'll have me come out in the next week, 2 weeks, do a site visit. Hopefully I'll walk around with a manager or board member, or just have the information needed to know what you guys want to have done for the project. Once I have that, I'll walk it, take some pictures, we'll go through it, put the specifications together. So say we're at right now just getting specs together, 2 to 3 weeks. Then you review it with the board to make sure everything's on it that they like. So give that another week or two. Then once we get to that point, then we talk about contractors and holding a pre-bid, which I usually give about a week heads up for the pre-bid to happen. So you're 2 months already. That's not even getting bids yet. So once we're at that point, then, we walk through it. We do the pre-bid with the contractors. We walk the building together. We look at everything that's going to happen. We review the specs. We have a clear understanding of what needs to be done. Now the contractors can go back and put their bids together. From that point, I give them 2 weeks to get their bids back to the manager. Once the bids are back, then it's reviewed by the board, which could take another couple weeks. So a typical time frame, you're looking anywhere from 3 to 6 months. I mean,
it's that's just to start before the paint is actually being applied.
Correct. So you could, if you really pushed it and made it quick, and say the board got the bids in the same week they voted on who they wanted to go with, 3 months is probably the shortest amount of time you could possibly have. 6 months is a normal.
6 months is normal, and yep. Anything short of that is a fast project. And this is not a slam on any of the contractors, and certainly not a slam on Sherwin Williams. But if you don't give the vendor in anything a good amount of time, the jobs are going to get rushed. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not slamming anybody in that context. It's just more, you're better off as a board. You're better off as a manager giving more time, assuming more time for the project than less time. Is that a fair statement?
100%. Because the thing is, we don't know. Once you know that a paint project is going to get done, you don't know what you're going to run into. You could run into maybe some serious stucco issues to where now I have to call an engineer. I mean, it's that kind of things that always take away. That's why I say 3 months is if everything is perfect, everything happens smooth, the board can get together, they can vote, they can go through the whole thing like that. Yeah, typically it's around 6 months is a good average. But for when people are doing budgets, it can take a year and a half. I've seen them go 2 years.
Perfect. Okay. Now, you mentioned in your description a little bit when you do the property walk, if you have the right information from the manager, is there anything specific that the manager should be on the lookout for when the board alerts, hey, we're thinking of painting next year? Now, full disclosure, during the time of this recording, we are in September of 2020. And if the board is looking to paint their building in the summer of next year, 2021, what information are you looking for to make your work easier that you can get from the manager early? Is there anything specific that's going to help you?
So specifics typically are, do you have an idea when it was painted last? That kind of helps me assess the building before I show up. Usually paint breaks down. It's meant to break down in layers. If they knew something about when their sealants were removed and replaced, a big thing people forget are sealants. That is a huge deal with water intrusion. So knowing when the sealants were removed and replaced, knowing when it was painted last, do they know if the color is changing or not? If you know color change ahead of time, then you can put that in the specifications in order for the contractors to know that there will be a color change, because sometimes that could bring on extra cost. When it comes to that stuff, when it comes to flooring, knowing what kind of coating's on the floor, is it a waterproofing coating? Is it a regular coating? Anything I can know before I show up. All that stuff helps me better assess the building to put in the specifications together.
Absolutely makes sense. Now, one of those things that this is not a vendor issue, but it's a manager concern, and that is if you're going to change the color of a building, well, you're making a material change to the common element, and the board in and of themselves can't do that by themselves. That's going to be a unit owner vote, and the managers and the board need to understand that that's going to add time to this project, and in some cases it could take months, if not a year, to get the majority, and in some cases that might be 2/3 or 3/4, 66 or 75% of the unit owners all to vote in the affirmative to change colors. But at the same time, you have to give them color options. So Fred, can we talk a little bit about the process of giving options of colors, whether it's a 2 foot by 2 foot square, multiple squares on a wall, or a hallway? What should managers and boards be considering if they're going to make a color change? Where should they put the samples, and how many samples should they offer?
First off, color change is definitely the longest part of the project. That's going to extend it, just like you just said when you were talking about it. That could extend it. I mean, I've seen it last up to years before they could actually get a vote. So once you start thinking about color change, we're lucky at Sherwin Williams because we have technology to come out to the job, meet with the board or paint committee, whatever you have, and sit down with them and do color renditions online right there on the spot live with them. So usually what I've been doing is putting it on their TVs so that way everybody can see it. I just did one the other day and they were just flabbergasted on how I could sit there and cut out their building and put colors on instantaneous. So that way, usually boards are way out. They all have their ideas of what colors they want to put in there. And by the time I'm done doing the digital part, this is like first steps, the sloppy copy, they're down to about 3 or 4 schemes, which is that's a huge undertaking. It's very hard to do. And doing that and then moving forward, now we can put samples up. Now you're looking at maybe 8 samples, body, trim, maybe a door here and there. And, you obviously want to put those samples on an area that people will see, but maybe not visible to the street or visible to when you pull up to the building, and try to keep it away from that. It usually helps.
But do you suggest those samples being out in, I'm going to use the phrase natural light, both in the sun and the shade, so that the unit owners and the boards, before they vote on that color, can get a very solid understanding as to how that color is going to be viewed at different times of the day?
Absolutely. If you can put it in a spot and have somebody look at it in the morning, midday, evening, every time of the day possible, that color will change. It'll have various looks, especially beiges, greens, yellows. Those kind of colors tend to change with lighting. It's insane.
The good news is, from my perspective, since I'm colorblind, I would literally be at your mercy if you were to tell me that green or that yellow or that purple is changing. I would be sitting there saying, "Sure it is, Fred, no problem."
So you're going to pick out your house color?
That's a very good point. Very good point. My wife is happy that she can paint just about anything she wants. I think previous life I had a pink bathroom, but I didn't know it was pink because it didn't matter to me.
Right.
I couldn't see it anyway. And there are always going to be some people who are like that, where they just don't care. Talking about board members, they might not care about the shade of the color. They just want a blue. But changing a blue from a normal shade that's already there to a different shade is a color change, and that's going to trigger a vote. And boards and managers absolutely need to be cognizant of that, because to Fred, what you're saying, that could extend the timeline of this project. It could double, it could triple the time just to get that vote. But let's just make an assumption that we've already gotten the vote and we're going to put on blue. We're just going to use blue as a simple example. And now we're into the managers going through the process, and they pick the paint, and we've done your site visit. What are the things, and let's just say that the scaffolding's getting ready to go up, or the swing stages, and you're immobilizing and all that. What are the things that the managers and certainly the boards need to be aware of when we're talking about communicating to the residents about these projects? What kind of things have you seen in your experience that really can make a project go very well, and at the same time, if missed, can go very poorly?
To really get a project to run smooth, it's definitely communication. You know, I have 46 reps that I work with as a team that stop by and do site visits. So they'll be communicating with the contractor. It's really that trifecta. It has to be the manufacturer, the contractor, and the manager being all on the same page. I recommend pocket meetings when you can. If a manager can get out for 10 minutes, do a pocket meeting with the contractor, call the manufacturer. If you're concerned about something, have them be there. It's just that constant communication during the project is what makes it run smooth. So just staying on top of each other, just talking to each other. I love pocket meetings. I think they're great. Number one, best thing to do is a pre-construction meeting. Before the job gets started, you had the vote, you got the colors, everything's going. Let's start the whole process with a pocket meeting right off the bat. Pre-construction meeting. Once we do that, we pretty much set the expectations of the rest of the project.
And expectations can be monstrous, regardless of the size of the association. Some associations, $50,000 is all the money in the world, and other associations, $5 million is all the money in the world. But the expectation is still the paint needs to go on in a timely manner. It has to be clean. It has to be the site has to be prepped and taken care of properly. But I'd like to talk a bit about the actual vendors or the actual contractors that are put on the project. What I mean by that is boards from time to time I'm going to use the phrase go rogue, but they might want to use a painter that painted the building 5 years ago and might have done a substandard job, but they want to save money. And we all understand wanting to save money, but the internal challenges there can be, to a certain extent, you get what you pay for. So is there anything, Fred, that in your experiences talking about vendors, and we're not using names because that's not the idea, but is there anything that you see in your experience that might cause you or cause a board that they should be concerned about something if a contractor is unable to produce something? And that something might be workers' comp insurance in this example. But from an application perspective, is there anything that you might alert a board or a manager of, hey, if a contractor is saying a certain thing about a project, you need to be cautious? Is there anything that you might be able to kind of give us a little insight on?
Insurance, I think, is huge. So there's a level of insurance. 3 stories and below is a standard insurance that something happens on the project, they're covered. So you'd have to double check that insurance to make sure they're covered from, say it's a 4-story building, anything over 3 stories, that insurance has to be able to cover it. And I've seen that in the past where contractors thought they were insured properly. They go to the project, say they get the project, something happens on the project, and they're not covered because it's over 3 stories. So I would always say double check that. One of the other things I always say to double check is to call those references. They will give you references. And I've had cases where the boards reached out or the managers reached out to the references, and the references says, I will never use them on my project again. Why a contractor would put that in there, it's there. So I always say, even though they're giving you references that they've worked on projects, that doesn't mean they know 100% that they're happy with what they've done. So call every reference on their list, because honestly, you're going to get a way better opinion because they've already went through a project with those contractors. So it's really a big deal that people, I think, skip and don't tend to go that far with it.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things, and I think you're dead set on the insurance, you're absolutely right on that one. One of the things that I believe is a misconceived idea, and that is the time of a project. One of the things that I think people, boards and managers, tend to underestimate, since we live in Florida, is the weather. It rains what could be during the rainy season. It feels like it rains every day. Well, I mean, the end result is, I think a lot of these boards, they think they know what they want, but they just don't know how to get there. And managers, I think, want to work with boards to get what needs to be done, but not necessarily understanding the grunt work, the legwork, the amount of work that these projects can be. So from a convenience standpoint, Fred, if I could ask you a little bit about making the manager's life easier, making the board's life easier. How do you, representing Sherwin Williams in these types of projects that can be massive, what steps, what technology, what communication methods do you use and utilize to make the manager and the board's life easier? Because let's face it, they live on these properties, and it gets extremely emotional when unit owners get frustrated. So can you speak a little bit about how you can make the manager and the board members' life a little bit easier for these big giant projects?
Absolutely. So that's what my job is my job is to take stuff that's on a manager's plate, a board member's plate, and get it off of there. So when you have a paint project come up, you call me and you say, hey, we have a paint project coming up. We go through the steps that we just spoke about. What needs to be done, when is the time frames, all that stuff. We go over that first. So once you call me and tell me that, or email me, then that's when I do the specs. That's when I ask you, hey, what contractors have you used? What contractors do you like? So once that is pretty much established, you're done. The manager is done until bids come back. And then once the bids come back, we also have a bid dynamic to where I send it out to management companies. And I don't know if I've sent one to you yet, Paul. I'm not sure, but I built this about 2 years ago, and I've been sending it to management companies to
That's the scoreboard, right? The point system?
Yes, correct. So they enter the bids in that, and what it does is they have their questions that they want, they put it in there, and they score it across the board. So you could have a low bid, but maybe they're missing 3 or 4 things that are very important to you as a board. That'll deduct points from them. So say the mid bid has 90% of what you've asked, and their bid's a good price, then you're scoring them higher. So you actually can look at it as a big picture instead of just price. So making it big picture helps. But how I help out is you don't have to reach out for the bids. You don't have to do a pre-bid. You don't have to go to each contractor and ask them where their bids are at. There's a due date that goes to you. If it's not there, I'll reach out to them and I'll say, hey, bids are due this day. You need to have them into the manager by that day. If they're not in, I'll reach out to another contractor and have them take your spot and give you a bid. So by taking that stuff off a manager's plate, it just eases their mind. They don't have to worry about it from the beginning. And then through the project, we're there for site visits. And if problems arise, the manager can call me and we work it out.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, Fred, I really do appreciate your time today. We've got a lot of information out there for these projects. Again, some of these projects are smaller. Some of these projects are giant. The end result is more time. The board members, the managers should feel like if you think you're going to be painting in 6 months, you should really think about it in a year. You should be doubling that time just because you just never know what's coming up. And a perfect example of what you referenced earlier, Fred, was stucco. You might think that the paint is all you need to do, but God forbid that you have a stucco crack and the next thing you know, you've added three weeks to that project because stucco needs to be repaired, or rebar, concrete, all these things might need to be repaired before the paint can be applied properly. So again, Fred, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. If a manager or a board member or even a unit owner has questions about not only these projects, but just paint projects in general, what's the best, most convenient way for them to reach out to you directly?
You can either email me at Frederick, Frederick .Lauro, LAURO, @Sherwin.com, or give me a call, 813-526-1412. If I don't answer, leave a message, or you can shoot me a text at that same number. Text messaging usually is the best way to get me back and forth.
Absolutely. I think texting is the proverbial wave of the future because it's quick hits and we can all communicate relatively quickly. So Fred, again, thank you very much for your time. Much continued success for you and for Sherwin Williams. And we truly do appreciate the quality of work that you've done on the Associa Gulf Coast properties. We certainly hope to continue working positively in the future. Thanks again, Fred.
Thank you, Paul.